Previously on agentpalmer.com, I highly recommend you read Highly Inappropriate Tales for young people. Don't let Baldree's second cozy fantasy novel gather Bonedust, and I have to believe that Dano and Palmer Real Estate Hour didn't get picked up for a second episode. This is the Palmer Files, episode 124 with Movie Minute Rob. He's a movie blogger and podcaster, host of his own Minute by Minute podcast, who also happens to be from New Jersey but lives in Israel. How did that transpire? What are the differences and similarities between both of our first experiences in the Holy Land? What happens when a place stops being a noun and starts being real? And so much more. Are you ready? Let's do the show. Hello and welcome to the Palmer Files. I'm your host, Jason Stershik, also known as Agent Palmer, and on this 124th episode is Movie Minute Rob. Like many internet-initiated friendships, I have no clue how I came to know Rob, other than I know he was listening to this very show and commenting along the way. And from there, we started to get to know each other, and then I started to appear on his Movie by Minute podcast a few times, and now we're friends. It's not often you get to learn more about a friend, but it's always nice to do so. This is my friend Rob, and this is his story, of which I only knew one sentence, which was from Detroit to Israel, which was from his Twitter bio. Well, it both is and isn't as simple as that, and this is part of his story, as you'll soon hear. Before we get there, remember that if you want to discuss the episode as you listen or afterwards, you can find all related ways to contact my guest, Movie Minute Rob, and myself in the show notes. Rob's extensive work can be found online at movierob.wordpress.com. Don't forget you can see all of my writings and rantings on agentpalmer.com. And of course, email can be sent to this show at thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. So without further ado, let's get into it. Rob, I know that you live in Israel, but that you weren't born in Israel.
That's correct.
And I've documented on this show, maybe probably one of the only places I've really documented it, that I spent a semester abroad in Jerusalem and around Israel. But I didn't go back. I fell in love with the country, but not enough to move there. So I just want to know how a kid from Detroit ends up living outside of Jerusalem.
Okay, that is a fair question. So basically, I mean, the story goes really long, really far back. So back when I was a kid, okay, growing up, I originally up until the age of 8, I lived in New Jersey, okay. And then when I was 8, my mother got remarried, and we moved to Michigan, Detroit, or the suburbs of Detroit. I was living in Southfield, Michigan. So basically, throughout my entire education, I grew up in a religious or modern Orthodox Jewish family. So there was always Israel that we were talking about. We talk about all the different Jewish laws. We're people who always have kept Shabbat. We keep kosher. I mean, I could go on and on about all the different things we do.
All the things I don't. By the way,
okay, I don't preach that you need to.
Yeah, and
it would be nice if you did, but that's your, that's you.
Yeah, that's true. I like that. You're one of you are to me for an aside, one of the things that I love about Judaism, and that is someone who is much more. Strict is not a word I want to use, but much more observant of the religion.
Okay, that's the right word.
That does not look down on me. Like, I've met plenty of Orthodox and conservative and even ultra-Orthodox that I have talked to specifically in my time over there, but not limited to that do not look at me like, all right, like, who's he fooling? Like, we're still equals.
No, but I don't look at it that way at all. I look at it from the perspective that you have the potential to want to strengthen your Judaism at some point. but it has to be something that comes from you. It can't be something that comes from me or from anyone else.
Yeah.
Jason Sturcik, Agent Palmer, has to decide, okay, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's actually something that has always been very important in my life regarding anything. That whether it's about my website with the movie reviews, or whether it's about my podcast, all that stuff. It all has to do with what am I comfortable with, and what do I want to do, and what's good for me. And is it something that someone else is going to want to listen to or read? I don't necessarily do it for other people. I do this stuff for myself because it makes me feel good that I'm doing them.
Yeah.
Same thing with my home life. Everything that I do because it's what's better for me in my home life, my family in my home life, my community, I guess you could say, in my home life.
Yeah,
that's what it comes down to. So for me to say, okay, Jason, you're wrong because you don't keep kosher. I can't say that. There's no connection to that. I can't force you to do something like that. If you on your own decide that you want to do that, I'll be the first one to congratulate you and help you and give you tips or whatever it is that you need.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to say to you, you're a bad person because you don't want to do that.
Yeah, but I'm just saying I appreciate that exists within Judaism. Like, it feels like there are other religions that you and I on different ends of the observance spectrum would not be so friendly. But it was a digression still. So
I don't mind digressions.
I know. I've been on your show. I've digressed your show.
But that's what's fun about it. It's where the conversation leads you.
So, growing up modern Orthodox, and look, I grew up in conservative and Reform synagogues, and I also heard Israel. Like, it was, I think it's
right.
The homeland. It's part of it. But hearing about and look, I will be the first.
Wait, but let me continue with the story then, because I think you're taking it in the wrong direction. So, okay. I mean, I grew up in a community and a household that discussed Zionism, but it was never something that was pushed.
Okay.
It wasn't a question of, when will all of us be moving to Israel? It's okay. Israel is there. We have to support it, because we're quote unquote good Jews. That's what it comes down to.
Okay.
I would always hear stories, of famous Israeli soldiers, where you can even talk about, Yoni Netanyahu, or you can talk about Mickey Marcus, things like that. First of all, I loved watching movies about those people also, just to get the stories. I always had a warm feeling watching those heroic stories of Jewish or Israeli soldiers and the stuff that they were doing.
And that was growing up?
That was growing up.
Okay,
but it was never something that was okay, this is what I'm going to be doing.
No, that makes I only make so the delineation I'm making here is that I didn't have any of that. Like, I up to the point of, like, we support Israel because it's there and we're good Jews. I get, but I didn't know anything about the soldiers. In fact, it's not until I go to it's not until I go to summer camp that I meet my first Israeli and talk to somebody who had been in service. And that,
okay, well, there's a difference there, because again, I grew up in a modern Orthodox, community where we had teachers, who came for a 2-year sabbatical from Israel,
okay.
And they were teaching us and stuff like that. We weren't, all the studies obviously were still in English, because it was, still a Jewish day school in America, but that we still would hear stories and we would hear things about stuff that's going on. I mean, whenever, Israel's Independence Day, Yom Ha'atzmaut, came around, so there was stuff that was going on, but it wasn't something that was really prevalent in my life at that time.
Okay.
It was, okay, they're doing something for Independence Day. Okay, I'm going to be a part of it, whatever it is. But it wasn't something that I really dreamed that there would be more to that.
Okay.
Beyond that. I didn't know where my life was going, but I didn't. This was not on my radar at all. And like, I had friends whose families, would go on vacations and they'd go to Israel, and I had friends that would have pictures, of them at the Kotel, the Western Wall, Wailing Wall, whatever, however people want to refer to it in English. I saw pictures of them, and I still remember. I can even, if I close my eyes, which I'm doing right now, I can remember a picture of a friend of mine that when he was a little kid came to Israel, and here's a picture of him carrying a gun, or holding a gun next to a soldier.
Okay.
That's what was there.
Yeah.
Okay. But for me, it was, I grew up in a household. We were 7 kids because we were a blended family, and we didn't have the money to go on long family trips to Israel. We did the 12-hour drive from Detroit to the New York area to visit family. That was our vacations and stuff like that. Which looking back, I'm very glad that I had that, because that also added so much to enrich my life. The knowing, going through those type of trips, when you think about the trips of your youth and stuff like that. So the first time that I actually even thought of coming to Israel, there's a known thing, at least among modern Orthodox Jews, that generally between, I believe it's 9th and 10th grade, or maybe it's 10th and 11th grade. It's between 10th and 11th grade. Most modern Orthodox Jews, spend the summer. They spend 6 weeks in Israel or whatever it is. There are all these different programs. I mean, I was very involved in the youth organization NCSY. I don't know if you've ever heard of it.
No,
the National Conference of Synagogue Youth.
Okay, I was for me it was the Reform Movement's version. So it was I think it's URJ now, but it was UAHC at the time. Union of American Hebrew Congregations, I want to say. And now it's Union of Reform Judaism, I think. And for me, it was older. The program I went was a semester abroad for high school students, but before then, or around that time,
there's even more stuff regarding that.
But all I'm saying is I didn't know of any, like, this doesn't, for me, like, I heard about Birthright as a program.
Okay. Yeah, but Birthright I'm talking back in, I was in 10th grade in 1990, so that was before Birthright. Birthright only started years later.
So yeah, I'm not, but I only bring this up to say, similarly, Israel exists, but nobody's pushing me there, and I don't think like, oh, I'm going to go there. Like, it just doesn't. It's not in the brain space at the moment.
I mean, I knew that I would visit at some point, and again, because I had older siblings and I had older friends, stuff like that, I knew that in general, the year between 10th and 11th grade during that summer, I'm going to go to Israel. What program am I going to go to is a different thing. So I was very involved in NCSY. I was actually on the regional board of the Central East region, which is Michigan, Ohio, half of Pennsylvania, like Western Pennsylvania, Indiana, Kentucky. I think that's the various states that were involved there. And in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade, I was in regional board. In 12th grade, I was the regional president, of this organization. I mean, I had a lot to do with it. Now, the whole idea of this organization is to help less affiliated Jews become more affiliated. So they would have Shabbatot, they would have weekend getaways where they would expose people to the idea of what is spending Shabbat. So, and for those who don't understand what Shabbat is the seventh day where we all rest. The non-Jews decided to call that day Sunday, but we do that on Saturday.
Yes.
So whatever. So we would have this like long weekend and try to get people to become closer to their Judaism. And so the organization is made up of partially of people who are already affiliated, and then it's mostly people who are not affiliated in order to try and get them to become a part of it.
Okay.
Now, so they had a program to go to Israel between 10th and 11th grade, for people of that age. And when I told my parents that I wanted to go on it, they wouldn't let me. They said, no, we want you to go where you're going to be with more people who are religious. Because this program is mostly for people who are not religious. Okay. So I was a little upset at the time because I was very involved in this youth organization, and I didn't quite understand. Today, looking back, after was it almost 34 years, I can understand why my parents said that. There is something to that. But when I look at it, when I looked at it from the eyes of a 16-year-old, I was not happy.
Sure.
And so my parents did a little bit of digging around, and they basically said, okay, there's a program that we're willing to let you go on. It's a program that's sponsored by the organization known as Young Israel.
Okay.
Okay. Young Israel is the organization. They have affiliated synagogues all around America, and so they had a program that's to go to Israel for the summer. And I was like, I don't really know, whatever. And my parents said, if you want to go, this is your option.
Okay.
And I was like, I don't really know. And then the representative came and they interviewed me, and they started telling me about the program and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, you know what? If I really want to go, this is my opportunity. How bad can it be? You know,
Sure.
I was going without knowing anybody or anything like that. They had, I think there were about 120 people on this particular program that summer. They split us up into 3 buses and stuff like that. And one of the things that really got me interested was when they explained to me the itinerary. They basically said that every single day we're going to take you on two hikes to different places around the country. Each week we'd be in a different part of the country, and every day there would be at least 2 hikes plus other things that we would do. It was a very, very heavy itinerary.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, it's going to give me an opportunity to get to know the country. Something that I've only known through books or pictures or things like that. Again, this is 1990. So, there was no internet. There was just what you've been told by people and what you can read in a book.
Yep.
And so I sort of, acquiesced to the fact that my parents wanted me to go on this particular group. I said, all right. So I went. And I still, to this day, 34 years later, or almost 34 years later, remember that first day when I came. The flight came to Israel, and the first thing that they do, I'm sure you know what the answer to that is. What's the first thing you do when you bring a group to Israel? Where do you take them?
I don't. Customs. What?
No, come on.
No, you take them to the old city.
That's right. You take them to the old city of Jerusalem, and you take them to see the Western Wall. Okay?
Well,
Western
I guess
Wall
it all
again,
depends on when you come in too. Like I arrived in Tel Aviv in the evening, and I arrived at where I was staying at like 11 o'clock at night, right outside the old city.
So did we. It was the same thing.
Okay.
The planes usually, even today, the planes usually come in around 5-6 o'clock in the evening from America. And by the time you get organized, by the time everyone gets their luggage and you get through customs and all that stuff, yes. So you're going to show up at around 11 o'clock at night in Jerusalem. And so we got there, and it was an exciting idea. The fact that I'm there, because I'd never been here before, or whatever it is. And what this group did was, again, I cannot stop commending in my mind the way that they did this. They took us through the old city.
Yep.
And they sat us down in a place where we couldn't yet see the Western Wall. Now, just for anybody who's listening and has no idea what we're talking about, so the Western Wall is basically the last remnant of the Temple of Solomon, which was destroyed for the second time a little over 2,000 years ago. So, or a little less than 2,000 years ago. It was in 70 AD. And so, they take us around the old city, and we sat in a particular place, and they started talking to us about it, what it means to be in Jerusalem, in the old city, what it means to be near the Western Wall and where the temple stood. And then they had us all write on a little piece of paper, what do we think we're going to get out of this coming summer?
Oh, wow. Okay.
And we all wrote it down. I can't tell you exactly what I wrote because I don't remember. I from what I recall, I wrote something to the effect that I want to get a better appreciation of Israel during the course of the summer. I can't tell you that as a fact, but that's my recollection at least was. And then they took like a glass bottle of I don't know, wine, Coke, I don't know what it was, and they put all the pieces of paper in that glass bottle. so that no one can take it. And then they said on the final day, we're going to break it open and everyone can see, what they wrote, that type of thing. And then they took us to the side, and we got to see the first view of the area of the old city of the Western Wall. And I remember the first thing that went through my mind was, holy shit, I can't believe that there's more than just this little wall. Because, when you look at pictures, you see the picture of the wall itself. You don't know that the wall, there have been excavations over the years. So there's more, more than just the little area of the wall that has been excavated. They have part of the whole southern wall that's also been excavated since then. And it hit me. And I was like, this isn't something that you can understand just by looking at pictures. You have to live it. You have to feel it. And throughout the course of that night, just by looking at that, I said, wow, this is a place that feels so comfortable to me. I know that I'm going to live here one day. Within that first night that I came here. It was the way I used to always describe it, and I don't know if this is 100% accurate or not. It was that I felt that when I was in America, something was always missing. Okay. There was something missing for me, even as a 16-year-old. And then when I got here for the first time, I felt that, okay, that piece that I felt was missing is now being filled up. And I was like, wow, I feel so different now that I'm here and now that I see what's going on. Now, I had an amazing summer that summer. Because of we literally hiked the width and breadth of this country. It's, it is only the size of New Jersey, but there is so much to see. It's unbelievable. I mean, even, I've been here for so many years since then, and I still haven't seen everything because there's so much to see.
Yeah.
Whenever me and my family go for some sort of vacation, we always try and find a new place, and we're always able to find places and we're like, oh, wow. I didn't know that existed. And I mean, I know that we're not going to get into politics, but this and the recent history as much. But even when everything happened 6 months ago, on October 7th, there were towns that I heard the names of, and I'm like, I've never heard of that town, because there's just so many towns that are here.
Which it's also one of those weird things where I was there for 4 months, and similar to your summer trip, we did, we went from Eilat in the south to the Golan up top, and we went from the east to the west, and we tried to see as much as humanly possible. But there are times, despite the small nature of it, when I read in the news of like a very small town that we drove through, that I'm like, I remember that. And it's right. So, and it somehow it works both ways, where it's like you will always be able to find a place you've never heard of, but somehow you will also always be able to find a place you have heard of.
Exactly.
And I'm not talking about just Jerusalem and Tel Aviv and Eilat, and I'm not talking about just the big stuff. And it's just, it was 4 months. For me, it was 4 months decades ago, and it's like I still remember that stuff. I do remember a feeling of peace. I don't know if I felt at home, but there is a different. And again, it's hard to describe. Peace, calm. I don't know. Like it was a time in my life when, for the first time ever, I was actually ready to learn. Which I was 16.
Well, again, I know your story, so I know that you didn't want to. You had enough of what they were doing to you, in your school, that therefore you needed.
I needed to get out,
find an outlet, and you found the outlet that you were willing to be that you were willing to accept.
Yeah, but and this is what
you were open to it.
I have to ask. Like all throughout my 4 months there, which I wouldn't trade for anything. There's honestly never a I don't even think I had a passing thought of like, I'm coming back here. Like it just, I don't know that happened. And if it did, I didn't document it, which I documented a lot of that trip. So it feels like I would have.
Okay.
So I loved it. I kind of felt it was temporary, and I think maybe that's what buys you into like, I'll probably never be back here again. Like, let's open up and take as much in as possible.
Right.
But there's a long way from, I'm here for a summer, I land and I want to be here back, to actually going back.
Right. Okay. Well, again, there's
Yeah, I know.
There's a lot
I know.
more to the story.
Yeah.
The story is not over.
Yeah.
So first of all, like I said, I always look back on that summer very fondly. I even still have the itinerary.
Okay.
And every year or two, I look at it and I'm just amazed at all the different places that they took us.
Have you revisited some of those places?
Of course.
Okay.
Of course. Not because it was on the list, but I've been back to some places, and obviously the memories are very different. Like I remember that summer they took us to a water park, and I guess it must have been about 8 or 9 years ago, maybe a little less. No, it was probably about 8 or 9 years ago that I convinced my wife. I said, let's go back to that water park, and it was not the same experience at all.
Okay.
Again, there's a 30-year difference between the two, but still, it was, as a kid, you go and I had a blast at that water park. But sometimes the idea of revisiting your memories isn't always a good thing.
So I do want to ask real quick, between Jersey and Detroit, what's your experience with public transportation, and how does it maybe differ from what you get when you're there? Because
very different. I grew up in a family where there was no public transportation.
Okay.
It was always my mom taking me somewhere or riding a bike somewhere, or like I lived a mile away from school. So there were times when I would ride my bike to school. There were times when I would walk to school or walk home from school with friends and stuff like that. But there was never buses or anything like that. And then when I got my license, because in Michigan you get your license at 16. So when I got my license, we had like a spare car for the kids in my family, and because I was the youngest, so I had a car.
Okay.
So I was going to school. I was driving to school in 10th grade already with a car.
Okay.
Because there was no public transportation.
Yeah.
But in Israel, it's the exact opposite.
Yeah. And that's why I ask, because when I grew up in small town, PA, like there's no, maybe there's a bus, but it's not nearly as connected as say it is there.
I couldn't even tell you where the closest bus stop was to my the house I grew up in.
Okay.
No clue.
But
absolutely no clue.
4 months in Israel, and I was taking public transit, I think, from day 2, maybe. Like once, you're a little tentative because, again, I'm like you, I'm coming from no public transport at all.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I can get anywhere I want with like one bus or maybe a bus and a transfer. And then it's like, wow, this is
exactly
unique.
Right. I mean, I obviously that summer I didn't travel on very many buses. I think I had like a free weekend or something like that. And at that point I traveled on buses, but most of the time, or public buses. I mean, most of the time we were on buses, with the tour.
Yeah.
That type of thing. But no, that's but the bottom line is that I left that summer knowing that I was going to be coming back here.
Okay.
When? I didn't know.
And how? I guess there's a how as well. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. There are a whole bunch of questions that I didn't know the answers to at that point, but I knew that that's what I wanted to do. Now, during that summer of the summer of 1990, that was when Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait.
Yeah.
I still remember that day, August 2nd. I remember where I was. I remember what was happening, everything like that. And then 6 months later, when I was already back in America, obviously, and they're talking about the Gulf War and everything like that. There were all these solidarity missions that were coming to Israel, to support the country because Saddam was threatening to shoot rockets. No one ever does that, right? That doesn't happen in this country. And basically, I had heard that like I had 2 brothers that were studying in New York. One of them was doing a master's, I believe, and one of them was finishing up his BA. And there was a solidarity mission, which was, from what I understand, was sponsored by the same people who sponsored Birthright.
Okay.
But this is long before Birthright, where they basically chartered planes and said anyone who wants to go to Israel, you pay like, I don't know, $500 or whatever, or $100. I don't remember what it was at the time, to go. And I said to my parents, I said, hey, I want to go. And they said to me, you are 17. You're not going. You're staying here. You're not going into a war zone. So I was like, all right, what can I do? I didn't really have much of a choice at that point. I still was living under my parents' roof. Wasn't much I could do about that. Then we move forward another year and a little less than a year. So this youth group that I was a part of. So here I am, 12th grade. All right. And the youth group that I'm part of, NCSY, also they decided to do a solidarity mission over Thanksgiving.
Okay.
That year. It was subsidized, and they were inviting people that were, very influential in the group. It was, in the whole, on the national spotlight from this organization. And they picked, I guess 15 or 20 people to go. And I was one of the people who was picked to go. And it turns out that it happened to be the exact same week that we were going on our senior class trip. The senior class trip was going to Washington. And here I had the opportunity to go to Israel, for a week.
Yeah.
And I was debating what to do, whatever. And I said, I can go to Washington anytime I want. How often do I get an opportunity to go to Israel?
That's fair. Okay. So there's trip number 2.
Trip number 2. Okay. So in the end of November 1991, so I came again to Israel. Again, a very intense tour, just 7 days. And the itinerary there was also just amazing with the stuff that they were giving us. One of the sessions that we had was even convinced me of what I want to do for my living in the future. Okay. Which it didn't pan out, but that was what I wanted to become a journalist, but because of a lecture that I had been at. It was a lecture run by an organization which is now defunct, called FAIR, which was known. It's an acronym for Fighting Anti-Israel Rhetoric. Okay. And the idea was to show the way the media biases everything that happens in Israel.
Okay.
And during the course of this 1 or 2 hour lecture, they showed us example after example of the way that the media portrayed Israel, and obviously today that hasn't changed much. That we're being portrayed as the aggressors instead of being on the defensive. Okay, whatever. Again, we're not getting into politics, so I'm not going there. I'm just mentioning that as a side. And after spending this week here again, I once again said, because I felt when I came back here during that week, I felt once again something come over me that here I am, I'm home again.
Yep.
And when I was in America over that year and a half,
in between,
I did feel, in between, I had lost that feeling, once I was back in America. So here I came back to Israel, and once again, I'm feeling it. And I'm like, okay, this is, I don't know if you can say it's a sign, but this is something is telling me that this is where I'm meant to be.
Something being missing is one thing, but is it depression? Is it just like, I don't feel like it's just something, is it just something off? It's just, I didn't feel as comfortable. Okay.
That's all it came down to. It wasn't depression. It wasn't that I was, on the verge of suicide or I can't believe I'm living here or anything like that. It wasn't that. I was still going about my daily routine. It wasn't, I think I noticed it more when I was here, that when I wasn't here, it was missing.
Okay. That's fair. You don't know what you got until it's gone. And then all of a sudden you go on the first trip and it's like, oh my God, this is amazing. I have this thing. You have this connection to the land that you didn't. I mean, you can hypothesize you have a connection as a Jew to the land of Israel, but until you go, you don't know. I had a connection while I was there. It did not feel missing when I came home. You had a connection when you were there. It was definitely missing when you came home. I can understand that.
Correct. And I will once again open up the invitation. You are welcome to come visit whenever you want. Just get on a plane, I know you won't, but I'm still offering it, and
I know.
I'm not offering it because I know you're going to say no. I'm offering it. I'm genuinely offering it,
If
and I hope that one day you will take me up on that offer. How's that?
it's I will say this. Whether flying's in my future or not, I think going back in some capacity is probably on the top of my list.
Okay.
Just because you talk about the whirlwind tour of your week the second time, and I equate that to what my parents went through, because halfway through my semester, my parents came. We had a parents' week, right?
Okay.
Instead of a weekend. So whoever could, the parents flew over, and our parents got a mini whirlwind trip where it was like they got to see a bunch of stuff and us. Like, it wasn't just our parents came over and saw us. Our parents came over and had their own experience, and then occasionally they made sure the itineraries crossed with ours, and we got to see our parents.
Wow.
So that was a way for them to get an experience, but I know that they were massively busy for those 5-7 days they were there. And did
it make an impact on them besides saying that, okay, you can stay?
I mean, I was halfway. They weren't going to pull me out at that point. But it did. I've only talked to him. I haven't talked to him about it nearly as much as I probably could have. But it was both of their first times.
Okay.
So I think it would have been impactful either way.
Okay.
But so,
I mean, I'm remiss. It's a good thing that you mentioned it that way, because I didn't mention, like, my siblings and my family, how all that impacted them and stuff like that with them coming to Israel. So, like, my mother, the first time she came to Israel was in the 60s. She came on a cruise ship with her parents.
Wow.
And they spent like a month here because if you're already going to take a week cruise ship, you're not going to go back that. So and that had an impact on my mother, but again, she went back and that was it. I'm going to even go further back. My grandfather came here in the 1920s, and he was living here for a few weeks, and it just wasn't good for him, and he went back to America. Okay, then in 1948, one of his nephews came to fight in the War of Independence. And then after the war ended, nobody heard from him. Again, no internet, no cell phones. So they sent my grandfather to come here to look for him.
Wow.
So he came to Israel to look for his nephew, cousin, whatever it was, and he ended up finding him. And he convinced him to go back to America. At that point, he was, I guess, having fun here and didn't want to go back after the war was over. And he eventually got him to go back. And ironically, when my grandfather was here, he purchased some agricultural land that he ended up willing to my brother and myself, which we ended up selling probably about 10, 12 years ago. And, my grandfather bought it for peanuts. In 1949, and when I sold it in 2012, I made a lot of money off of it. My wife and I were actually able to have enough money to buy our house, or to pay for our share of the house, before the mortgage, based on that. So
wow.
And then a few other quick things. So I had a sister, one of my stepsisters, came here for a year in 1985, I think it was 84, 85, something like that. And she loved it, and she wanted to stay longer. She actually volunteered in a hospital in the preemie ward and stuff like that. She actually sent me last year, like there was an article about her at the time, or an article that had her, a picture of her, whatever it is. So she wanted to stay here, and it didn't work out for her, so she went back. And to this day, she's still in America. Then two of my two brothers that I mentioned earlier, both of them came for their gap year.
Okay.
And studied here, and then went back to America. And
you know all this now? Did you know? I guess the question would be: did you know all of this during any of your trips? Like, was Israel not the place for Jews or the Jewish homeland? Was Israel the place I've been talked about from your mother and your brothers? Like,
No, that's the thing. No one ever talked about it.
Okay.
You know, when my brother was here for his gap year, so my stepfather came to Israel for the very first time in his life when he was 50. Okay, that was the first time he ever came to visit Israel. My father, who died in 1977, okay, at the age of 41, never came to Israel in his entire life. You know, which is something that really, to me, it always, you know, that I always wonder what he ever thought of it. You know, that kind of thing.
I'm just amazed that all of these people in and around your life had these experiences, and they just didn't talk about it.
That's right. They talked about it, but it wasn't. It wasn't anything beyond, okay, I went on a trip to Israel.
Okay.
That type of thing. You know, that's what it came down to.
All right.
So here it was once again. I spent that intense week here. Loved it. I have not been to. Sorry, I said to Washington. The trip was actually to Disney. It was to Disney World in Florida. Okay. I've never been there since then. That's the irony of that.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. And it turns out that because they had already paid for my ticket. So at the time they convinced another classmate of mine to go on the trip instead of me because they had this extra ticket. But because she was female, so on her ticket, so she just had to tell everyone her name was Roberta. Okay. Instead of Robert, that type of thing. and that was obviously, was it 10 years before 9/11? So, people could travel under assumed names, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You didn't need to use as much, you didn't have to give the ID like you do now.
So I don't know this about you, so it's the leading question. So you come back, and is college in the books for you? Like, is that something you want to do? And
yes.
If it is, how is your first thought? Not, I'm going to study abroad.
No, it wasn't. It wasn't even a factor. I didn't even think about studying abroad. So once again, as I mentioned, the fact that a lot of modern Orthodox Jews at the time and still today, they go on the summer trip between 10th and 11th grade.
Yep.
And then they spend a gap year after 12th grade before they start studying in college or university. They spend a year in Israel, studying, about history, in some sort of program or whatever it is. So I always knew that that's what I was going to do. Okay. Because that's what everyone does. You go to Israel for a year. In my school, my school actually had a policy that they truncated they truncated the high school years. I mean, I was in a day school that went from K through 12, right? So they truncated the high school years to a 3-year program instead of 4 years, so that your 4th year you actually are able to go to Israel.
Okay.
So 3 years before my class was supposed to come for that year, they decided to cancel that program. Okay, so my class was the very first class in my school to spend 12th grade in Detroit.
Wow. Okay.
Which again, it's all part of my story here, because if I wouldn't have, I was in 12th grade when I said I was the regional president, of the youth organization. That wouldn't have happened had I been in Israel that year. I wouldn't have come to Israel for that intense week trip had I already been here for the year, that type of thing. So, at that point I had to decide, okay, what program am I going to go to? And, obviously there are programs you need to be accepted to and stuff like that. So I randomly chose 3 different places that I was interested in going to based on things that I'd heard from different people. And I, went through all the tests that you had to go through to get into these places. And I was actually accepted to all 3. And the idea is that, okay, I would do a gap year and then I'll go back to America and I go to university.
Okay.
And study. The plan was to study journalism. That's what I wanted to do. So I said, okay, great. How difficult can that be? I spend a year, take a year off, and then go back and find a place to go study journalism. In 12th grade, I actually even took a few courses at the local community college just to get things moving, to give me credit and stuff like that. I took a psychology course and a creative writing course and things like that, which again, to this day, both those courses impacted me so much on my thinking and the way that, because, as a 12th grader, you don't do those things usually.
No.
Not everyone's Agent Palmer, where you're doing all these. So I then once I got accepted to all three of these programs, I had to choose between them. My original hope was, okay, I get accepted to one, and then you don't have to make a decision as to where you're going to go.
Yeah,
that's it's sometimes you got to be careful what you wish for. You might actually get it. That type of thing. And the program that I actually chose was one that's actually in the old city itself.
Okay.
Of Jerusalem, because I recalled that how much I enjoyed during the summer the summer program when I was there for a week in the old city, and then I didn't mention this before, but the program that I did during that week during my senior year was entirely in the old city. So once again, I fell in love with the old city again each time. Yeah. So I said, hey, I now have an opportunity to be there for an entire year. That would be great. Why not? Yeah. So that's what I decided. And again, I didn't know anybody in the program really that were coming. There were a few people that I knew a little bit here and there, but not intensely.
So the old city, we got to stop for a moment. We got to talk about the old city. The old city is not something I think it's an American thing. The old city is not something you're prepared for as an American.
No,
it is cramped. It is small. It is beautiful, but it is all of these things that even like the most dense downtown has like plenty of room by comparison. And part of it,
there are almost no cars that can go in there. There's like very few streets that you can get a car on. Most people, if you're traveling, you're either walking or you're going to go by a bike.
And I think that's
when people have to transport things, they're doing it with carts and stuff like that.
Maybe it's a European thing. Like some European towns are a bit smaller like that, but it's just the 2,000 years of, 4,000 years of history, all that stuff that builds up. I mean, it's small. And it's the year 2000 and I'm there and we're not supposed to go unescorted into the old city.
Right.
We're not supposed to. We did, that was not, and I'm glad we did. Wandering around the old city was probably one of those like core memories that'll never go away.
Okay, but the question is that again, for people who aren't familiar, the old city is basically split up into 4 quarters.
Yeah, okay? But it's also there's modern Jerusalem.
Yes,
and then there's the old city, which is legitimately walled off with the 4.
Completely.
Yep.
Right, but since you have the 4 quarters, you have the Jewish quarter. The Jewish quarter, in general, it's I guess everything's relative. It's relatively safe to walk around there. Yeah. Then you have the Armenian quarter, you have the Muslim quarter, and you have the Christian quarter. Okay, and so again, for me, it was always okay. You can go through the Armenian quarter, you can go through the Jewish quarter. That's it. Don't go to the other quarters.
Okay.
Stay away from there. Even when I was in the program for the year here, they were staying away. The morning after I got here for this program, so me and friends of mine went to the Arab market in the Muslim quarter. Because we wanted to go and haggle, and we wanted to go, to feel as if we're more than just these little 18, 19-year-olds.
You don't want to you don't want a tourist experience as well.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. So I remember I ended up buying a chess set, and I bought sandals there, at relatively low prices because I haggled with them and stuff like that. And then, I went home. I went back to the program, and the following morning I was going to play chess with a friend of mine, and we start setting up the chessboard, and we realized that he didn't give me 7 pieces. So we went back the following morning and started, arguing with the guy, and he wanted more money. And, today I realize how stupid that was. There's certain things you don't do, but, we went there and
you had fun,
we're arguing. I had fun. Yes. And thankfully I'm still alive after having that fun.
Now,
Yeah.
I have a question. If it hadn't been based in the old city, would you have picked a different program?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Of course. But since I had that option, that's the one I went to. It was a question of how to choose between the three programs. That was what it was.
Did you notice something? Rob's not permanently settled in Israel yet. Well, for those of you who've heard me on his show discussing things like The Great Escape, Die Hard, and most recently, It's a Wonderful Life, and even if you've only heard this show, you'll know I can talk and Rob can talk, and thus we've split this into 2 episodes. That's right. It's a story so long it couldn't be contained by just one singular episode. So until next time, I want to say that it has been a pleasure to get to know Rob via email and talking before and after recordings on his show, and it's a testament to the good relationships that actually can come about through the internet. And while Rob's and my friendship is less common, it does shine a light on a real friendship that can happen through the internet across an ocean and many, many, many time zones. So until next time, with the exciting conclusion of Rob's story, thanks for listening to the Palmer Files, episode 124. And now for the official business. The Palmer Files releases every 2 weeks on Tuesdays. If you're still listening, I encourage you to join the discussion. You can find all related ways to contact myself and Rob in the show notes. There you will find links to Rob's relevant social channels, podcast, and website. The music for this episode was provided by Henno Heitur. Email can be sent to this show at thepalmerfiles@gmail.com. And remember, your home for all things Agent Palmer is agentpalmer.com. All right, Rob, do you have one final question for me?
Yes, of course I do. I've been waiting years to ask you questions, and I finally thought of one for today. There you go.
Okay.
All right. Because of the current climate around the world.
Yes.
Okay. Do you feel that in certain situations you need to hide the fact of your religion?
I want to say no, but I feel like it's a default yes. My father converted, so I don't have a Jewish last name, right? And I always wear a Chai necklace that my now dead uncle, may he rest in peace, bought me. And it's the only piece of jewelry I wear right now. And it's the only piece of jewelry I've worn since I was 13. But it's a necklace. It's not, it's under my shirt most of the time. So to look at me, you wouldn't know. Right. So I don't have to hide it. But it's a yes and no because I also don't volunteer it either. I don't wear a yarmulke everywhere I go. So there are some of what people call the telltale signs. I don't carry with me, but by the same token, if anybody asks, I say I'm Jewish. Like I don't hesitate if I'm asked. Do you know what I mean? If it comes up or for whatever reason. But given the current climate, and this is probably as political as I'll ever get. I absolutely hate the current political climate because it feels like people just realize there's a conflict there.
Correct.
Only since last October versus maybe part of growing up within Jewish circles of, from Reform to Orthodox. You've kind of known about this internal brewing conflict since 1947. It feels like
it's been longer.
I know it's been.
No, I'm saying even in America, it's been longer.
I know. I'm just saying.
About all the anti-Semitism in America in the 20s and 30s, even before.
I'm just talking about the current ongoing thing. Like we've known about it for the whole thing. So for me, I don't know. I don't. Let's put it this way. It's not on my sleeve. I don't hide it, and I say proudly that I'm Jewish, but I don't know if I could do a better job saying I am or whatnot. I know I could always probably be a better Jew. I know that.
That wasn't my question. I told you at the beginning
I know that, but I'm saying that. And I actually, so as you know, cause you listen to the show and as other listeners will know, I'm reading all the books in my house. I have not gotten to the two shelves of what I will call Jewish literature.
Okay.
On I don't know.
On purpose, you haven't gotten there. Like you're saying, I'm saving.
No, I'm not saving it. I just haven't got it. It hasn't cracked the list yet. Because there's still a lot of books in my house. But I know that this summer, I'm going to start in on some of the books on those shelves.
Okay, you don't mix and match when you're reading books. Like for instance, when I watch movies, I can watch them. In one day, I'll watch like a comedy from the 80s.
No, I do.
A classic from the 40s. I mix and match. It doesn't matter to me.
I do mix and match in terms of like fiction and non. But one of the reasons that's kind of kept me away from that shelf is I read before bed. And I try not to read thinking material before bed. And I know that they're not going to be difficult reads as far as like, I won't understand the subject matter, but I expect them to be challenging reads in that some of my beliefs are going to be questioned or put to the test or expanded in a way that I think I'm finally in a place where I'm ready to tackle that. And so that's why it's going to start happening. So I don't know. We'll find out where I end up at the end of that shelf. But I mean, one or two books isn't going to make a difference probably, but a full shelf of them,
Okay.
Maybe I will join you in not recording on the Sabbath, which is something I do from time to time.
Okay. Well, as you know, I won't even write to you when I know it's the Sabbath by you. Because I don't want to make you write back to me. Because of the 7-hour difference. That's what I'm saying. If I have to write something, like, sometimes on the Saturday night, I'll be like, wow, I really want to write something to Jason. And I'm like, no, I'm going to wait till Sunday morning because I don't, again, you do what you want. That's fine. But I don't want to be in the position where I'm making you do something that I personally think possibly you shouldn't be doing. Let's put it that way.
I gotcha. I know, I get it. And I also think I've been trying to, I feel like there's a part of it that's a balance issue. If I actually took the Sabbath off, generally speaking, I think I might be healthier. So it's all.
Well, there is something to that. The idea, I mean, again, if you want to go into, things that Talmudic thought and, there are a lot of places that what they say is that the idea of taking that 1 day break, is to, on the one hand, replenish yourself. But, the belief is that, if you don't work on that day or you're not, again, this is for people who believe, God will not, you'll still earn whatever you're meant to earn during the course of that year. the idea is that you're supposed to take a break during that day. And let me just even tell a short little story about that one, about
Yeah.
my grandfather. Okay. Not the grandfather I talked about before, my other grandfather. My grandfather from my father's side, moved to America. Well, actually my great grandfather, moved to America in 1903. He came on a ship from Poland, and his wife had two children in Poland that they waited 2 years before he brought them over.
Oh, wow.
Okay. My grandfather himself was I think 4 when he came over, and I actually even went onto the Ellis Island website, and I was able to find the manifest of the ship where my great grandmother and then my grandfather and his sister came on that ship.
That's amazing.
And he grew up in a religious home. I believe they were living in Albany or somewhere in upstate New York. And, he got older, he got married, he had 3 children, and he was working in a furniture factory. And this was, the 1930s, early 1940s, when the blue laws were in effect in America, where basically, businesses needed to be closed on Sundays, but on Saturday, they pretty much had to be open. Yep. It was a 6-day work week. And, my grandfather, being a religious Jew, was not willing to work on Saturday for this. There were a lot of stories of people that would, show up for work on Monday morning, and, they were told on Friday, if you don't show up tomorrow, you're going to be fired. They would get fired. And then, Monday morning, they'd have to look for another job again because of their beliefs. And what my grandfather did is he was working in this furniture store or furniture factory, and he made a deal with the owners, that he's not going to come in on Saturdays, but every other day of the week, he's going to come in early and he's going to leave late.
Wow.
And, he did this for however long, I don't know how many years he had this deal work. And one morning in December of 1944, he came to work early in the morning. He was the only one in the factory. The elevator door opened. He stepped in, and unfortunately, there was no elevator there. And he fell down one flight, but hit his head on a metal beam. And after a few days in the hospital, he passed away. So, on the one hand, that's a very sad story. And it's a story that I've heard so many times, ever since I was a kid. But I take the important lesson out of that, your beliefs are more important than anything else.
Yeah. If you believe, you can find a way. I feel like that's right. Part of it.
That's right. And for him, it was important for him not to have to work on Saturday. I'm assuming that even before the accident, it caused a lot of stress in his house that he wasn't around, because he was going to work early and coming home late and everything like that. But the idea that they knew that the reason he's doing this is because of religious beliefs, is to me, here, this is a story that happened 80 years ago. And, it still gives me strength whenever I think of that story, because it shows that you need, if you can, you need to move as many worlds as possible in order to continue to fulfill your beliefs and do what you believe is the right thing to do.